Jim, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Is the meeting started? I can't figure out anything. Have we started, Jim?
We have not. I think everyone's just waiting.
Oh, great. Okay. I know if I was missing something. I mean, I see the agenda thing, and I'm on my iPad. It's very difficult on the iPad.
Okay.
Yeah.
You're looking good.
And you do too. Oh, man.
So, George, just so you know, we do have a quorum. 4 of the 5 of the board members are present, yourself included. I do just want you to know Sharon, unfortunately, will be late. She has another meeting that she's trying to get through, and she will join us as soon as she can.
Ellie Ray, I'm sorry. It sounds like you're in a box. I didn't understand any of that. I'm sorry.
Okay. So you have a quorum?
Yep.
Can you hear me better?
A little bit, yeah.
Okay.
You know, it's like in a tunnel.
I'm sorry. I wish I had. I don't know.
I got you. Go ahead. Thank you.
See if I have. Oh, thank you, Commissioner Dean. Glad you can hear me well, Emily. I'm trying to see if this has a headphone jack. Maybe that will be clearer. Sorry. During the pandemic, I got new monitors, so let's see. Can you hear me better, George?
What did you say?
Oh, that didn't work. Anyway.
There you go. That's it. That's it. Ellie Ray, go. That's it.
So we have a quorum, like I said. Sharon, unfortunately, will be late to this meeting because unfortunately she is in another one right now.
Okay.
She'll be with us as soon as she can. So whenever you would like to get started, you can do so.
So Ellie Ray, can you hear me okay, Ellie Ray?
I can indeed.
And Ellie Ray, I'm on my iPad. So if I have to do anything, you know, I've got it rigged up with tape and a piece of wood to try to keep it in the right place. If I need to do anything on it, I'm going to have a problem if I need to touch stuff. So we'll move forward. So welcome everybody. You know, I can't see anybody except the agenda.
Yeah,
can we just put
George, that's how
we don't need to see the agenda. Everybody's got the agenda.
So we keep it up there in part for members of the public as well who are attending.
Oh, no, I got you. Sorry,
yeah.
You're right. Yeah, thank you. So welcome everybody to the meeting. I'll call the meeting to order. Let's have introductions, including any guests that are there that want to introduce themselves. And Ellie Ray, I'd like to start with you. Come on down, Ellie Ray.
I am Ellie Ray. I'm a planner in the city's community development department.
I'll go next. I'm Emily Dean. I'm on the city commission.
I'm Jim Whaley, and I'm on the ADA committee, and I'm an architect.
David Knopke, Transportation Systems Director.
I'm Christy Pinozzo. I'm the Parks and Recreation Director for the city.
Are you missing anybody other than April? Gina, have you had a chance to introduce yourself?
Oh, I'm Gina Lytle, and I'm a community member who has a disability.
And serves on the committee.
And serves on the committee.
Yeah. And I'm George McCauley, raconteur, potter, and chair of the ADA Compliance Committee with the City of Helena. So welcome everybody to the meeting. Hope you're all doing well, and we'll proceed with the agenda. ADA concerns / complaints status report, which I believe is the fantastic Ellie Ray.
So before that, George, I just want to double check. April, did you have an opportunity to introduce yourself? I was pulling up the file.
Oh,
No,
April, I'm sorry.
I didn't get an opportunity to introduce myself. My name's April Sparks. I am the new administrative assistant for the Community Development Department.
April, I apologize. Thank you.
It's okay. I wanted her to make an introduction since
Yeah.
she is new to the team, since Stephanie is now the deputy city clerk. So we can move forward. So getting onto the agenda, George, we did not have any complaints submitted between April 22nd when we last met and, well, last week, but also today.
Okay, excellent. Thank you, Ellie Ray. And Ellie Ray, if it's okay, I'm not gonna mute myself. If I'm not talking, I'll just be quiet, but I have to keep, it's just a bad situation with the deadgum iPad thing. So
no, that's not a problem. I did want to also note really quickly, George, because of the ordering of the agenda. So I apologize. The agenda itself, we didn't actually update the wording on item C to say that we do have minutes. So the packet was revised.
Oh, shoot.
You guys were issued with minutes, and they are at the bottom of this electronic packet. So I don't know if anybody had any questions, comments regarding the minutes as presented that Stephanie worked on for us last week.
So and I thank you for catching my mistake, Ellie Ray. I should have done that. I'm a bad chair.
My mistake
Jim
too.
should be chair.
Okay.
Jim should be chair. He's a good meeting person.
So I reviewed the meetings and I don't have any changes, so I'd move to approve the meetings minutes from April as written.
I have some questions.
Okay.
So, when I go through the minutes, I always see things that maybe weren't covered, and I have so many questions. We have a meeting, but I got plenty of questions about maybe what hasn't been done yet. So I do want to explain something about my remarks at the first page of the minutes, 454. That's the paragraph. And shoot. So that, Ellie Ray, in a number of minutes, in a number of meetings, I had asked the question to everybody about those groups that places hired to snowplow their sidewalks. And this refers to, we see it everywhere, they plow the snow in accessible parking or on the sidewalk. And I do understand that you said many meetings ago that I'm going to call it instructions are given to those people who do that kind of plowing. Do I remember that correctly?
I think that might have been a statement that came from Director Kanapki and not me, but yes.
I'm sorry, I didn't understand what you said.
So I think that you're probably right, but I think that that comment might have come from somebody else, like David Kanapki, Director Kanapki.
So then my question is, when those people, so many of those people do not follow the directions. And so when nobody reports that, we still have the disabled community with the bad end of the stick, because those people who are hired to plow correctly don't plow correctly. And unless somebody reports it, which is typical, it stays that way. And I know that y'all said, of course, the city doesn't have time to go check all the plowing, understand that. But it's another example of a problem we have all over the city with things like that, for which our disabled community suffers. So I just want to, and I'm still stuck on this. Those people, either they do it right or they don't get to have the license to do it.
Well, and are you talking about solely city-owned properties that are getting plowed in this instance, or are you talking about even private properties?
Well, the question I asked, I don't know, last year was, if a private property owner hires those people, I know you're not responsible, but don't they have to have a license to do that?
Well, if they're operating within city limits, yes, they should have a business license to operate, but we can't control the contract between the private entity and
That's correct.
two private entities. So we have no enforcement abilities with that.
And I point that out because, as you know, my litany of, I'm going to call them, I hate to call them complaints, but I'm going to call them things that I notice constantly through my work with the disabled community, are things like this. This is just another thing that the disabled community has to contend with. I mean, like the 9 things that I've issued months ago. At 9:12, Gina, we still have something. Gina suggested formalizing the existing policy in regard to ADA license plates and plaques for downtown parking. Has that, we're still, that hasn't been discussed. Where are we on that thing? That's
So,
at the 9:12 remark.
So the board didn't take any action to make a formal recommendation on that, but I believe, if I'm not mistaken, Director Knapke, wasn't that something that you guys were working on in transportation systems to consider that policy change? Am I remembering that correctly?
We're working on, code revisions with the police and city attorney.
Okay.
That is one of those that is part of the discussion.
Okay, thank you, David. So that, and David, things like that, I mean, I'm a note taker and I do read the minutes. That thing like that Gina had asked about, it's on your list of things that I don't have to remember that, right, from these minutes. You've got that in your many things to do, and you will give us the update. I don't have to remember it, do I?
No,
Okay.
we continue to work on it, and once we get to a point of a change or something that we need to bring to the committee, then that'll be put on
Excellent.
the agenda.
Thank you very, very much. And I want to say something on the second page at 20. Commissioner Dean asked Macaulay if he was in agreement with Gina Lytle's suggestion to have a citywide education awareness campaign. My dear friend David Knopke and I spoke with the last 3 city managers, I mean the 2 acting and the current one, about education. So Commissioner Dean, we have been talking about this for, who knows, I don't know, 2 years. So it's not something that I just came up with recently. And I'm going to be very delicate in asking about the remark at 27:15. I feel like I've gone over this so many times. And again, I and my dear friend David Knopke we've talked about this many times. The point of the T-Mobile situation is this, and I know I'm going to repeat myself, but we're still not at the point where the city is willing to do this. The things like T-Mobile that was an egregious situation for 6 months, maybe longer, but at least 6 months, that no one complained about except me. And I tried to work with T-Mobile corporate office. They would not clean up that stuff. And David Knopke got that done in one afternoon. My point, and thank you, David, but my point of that whole paragraph is that we have a city that's fraught with infractions, even though the My Helena app works beautifully. and our code enforcement officers are on top of those complaints and they get resolution, most of the infractions are never reported. That's why I keep asking the city, and this has been going on for 6 years, we need to have some additional, what is the word? Eyes, program, process, method to identify infractions. And most industrialized municipalities do that through city employees. Ana Cortez was for that. Melinda Reed was for that. I'm not sure about City Manager Harlow Schalk. I don't remember if she was in favor of that. And I won't speak for David, but there are plenty of people who are in favor of that. So this thing about T-Mobile, to me, that was the poster child for infractions. Most infractions never get reported. At 2857, there's a statement. Gina Lytle stated she disagreed. Gina, did you disagree with that, or is that a mistype, a misprint?
Um,
I mean, it says you disagree.
I don't know what I would disagree with, because I've been throughout the city and I usually report repeatedly about curb cuts, and so I don't disagree with, I don't know what it says I disagree to. I guess I'd have to listen to the minutes to verify.
Well, that was right after my statement. I'm thinking that was typed incorrectly. Maybe it was that you agree.
I would say that I agree that that's an issue, because I have similar issues in similar, at the same spot year after year, now that it's going on 3 years. So
I understand.
Yeah.
Thank you. I'm sure that was a mistyping thing. I'd like to, hey, David.
Yes.
I'm wondering if I can say a little bit about a discussion you and I had about incorporating the disabled community into what the city's trying to do. May I have your permission just to briefly give that discussion?
Sure.
So y'all, page 4 at 1 minute 14:14, I just want to explain something. I don't know that all the new commissioners know this, but I've been trying to coalesce the disabled community along with a few other people who are disabled to bring them into the discussion, into the solution to what the city needs to do and is trying to do to protect our most vulnerable citizens. And what I found, and I'm very sad to say this, but I, as an individual, and I with a couple of other people who are disabled, have been unable to coalesce members of the disabled community to work with the city so that the city doesn't do for the disabled community without the disabled community. And David and I have searched for ways to do this, and we both agree that if the disabled community, I'm trying to be nice. What I want to say is if they're not going to come forward, but what I feel better saying, if we can't coalesce them to work with the city, particularly on the education program, then the city has no, I'm very sad to say this, the city has no other out except to move forward. please y'all respond. Does that statement make sense? Because this hurts me to make that statement because I don't want to give up, but
So George, let me,
go ahead.
can I speak to that?
Absolutely.
So I've recently done a survey from my home to my physical therapy, to downtown, to the public library, and up to by where the Blue House is. I've taken pictures. I don't have the technology to type yet.
Yes.
So I need help, but I called and inquired because I've also encountered, glass where I'm like, oh, geez, I don't want to get a flat tire, big chunks. And so I did call the city and have a discussion. And, the best way to go about that is if I could present these pictures with some kind of Word documentation of, the location where they are. And I will continue to do this as long as I have the adaptive technology that I'm currently borrowing from Montech to get around. And I can tell you that with this adaptive add-on bike that I am not safely able to go to any of these locations. And I actually damaged the equipment because the sidewalks are so bad. There's no curb cuts. There's beautiful sidewalks that are incredibly wide that have absolutely no curb cuts by the RB drive-in and the old Florence Crittenden home or wherever that is, that beautiful sidewalk. So I'm in the street. So yes, I'm willing to work with the city, but I feel like the city, pays consultants to go and do assessments of the parking garages and the parking and contracts with MILP. And, they put in parking spaces that don't meet ADA code or in the best placement because the person doesn't legally drive and they're blind. So I think working with the community, I know plenty of people that are disabled that have been instrumental in over by Eagles Manor and Albertsons. And I think that if we present this in a positive way and that there is action being taken to make these routes accessible and clear of debris and whatnot, it'll make our city more accessible, pleasing to the eye. Because bicyclists, I'm like, how do you get across Montana Avenue? I'm terrified to cross Montana Avenue at that malfunction junction, but at least there's crosswalks and lights. And so that helps. But trying to go further down, those really aren't options. And so I'm actually working with a design company in California and high school students that are programmers to try and develop apps and to bring awareness and accessibility to communities. So I think that we're on the right track. We just need to keep moving forward and look at the positives and how can we present this stuff in a enlightened way so that people want to put curb cuts in at their city blocks and their place of businesses, but especially on the main routes. Because I'm used to flying into Denver airport and taking public transport by myself with luggage and having surgery, and I can make it from the airport to downtown to Inglewood, where my hospital is, by myself in my wheelchair and carrying all my belongings. And I cannot say that about Helena, Montana. And I would like to be able to say that. So I think I've said enough, but I'd like to move forward in that direction.
So in response to that, Gina, what you're saying is exactly what I've been trying to do. And David, certainly because of his department about streets and sidewalks, is certainly in favor of this. But the point, you talked about specific things. The point I'm trying to make is somehow, I have not been successful in gathering a group of disabled people, citizens, to have a meeting with the city. It is all important that we, the city, include people with disability, but I've been unable to do that. And I'll say again, 4 times, I've cried over this. I don't know what else I can do to bring the people to the city to have the solutions we need that include the people with disability. So if you can get us 5, 10, 20, 50, whatever it is, 6, 7, and we can work with our city manager and the city commission and David, we can have a meeting and discuss all this and see what the disabled community wants to happen. But without them, the city doesn't have any other way to do this except to move forward without them. And that's a disservice. But the city has no other way. So if you have
I'm just curious. Oh.
If you, and don't talk about specifics, the point I'm trying to make is if you can get us some disabled citizens, we get those names to city manager Harlow Shaw, then we can move forward with the meeting which we've been trying to have for 2 years. I'm unable to do it. If you can do it, I will be so happy, and so will David.
So George, this is Jim. I
Okay.
agree with both you and David that we really need to have a focus group or something with some representatives and really ask them and get some good input from them about what it is about Helena that works well, why they live here, why they enjoy living here, and what do they see as their challenges? Because I know you address a number of issues, but if those aren't issues that are necessarily even important to the disabled community, then we're trying to do this public information and awareness on topics that may not even be relevant. And so I really think that the first thing we need to do is understand from those people with disabilities where their biggest obstacles are and where we should be focusing. So
that's correct.
And does the city have a policy where I've seen city employees in wheelchairs, but I've never heard them speak or share any information? Does the city have a policy where they actually invite their employees that work there and what their experiences are? Because I think there was an employee that worked at the city county building, and the restroom and the mail thing didn't even go the right way, and the parking lot has never been. So I'm wondering if the city starts with their own people and inquires and gets feedback from them as a start to this process, because they should be the first ones using my Helena app and sharing. I think we should be including our own to do this. And sure, we have people in the community. I'm right here. I'm always available. I get asked, from my perspective, but there's no real follow-up calls, or there's stuff that happens like at Hill Park and the ADA. This committee wasn't involved in whatsoever. And so I'm thinking that it really needs to start with the city, that we need to embrace this and encourage people to speak out, unless there's some kind of climate. I don't know, but I think the community is willing to participate, that they just haven't. I don't know when they've been invited, and I'm part of that community.
So I'm very sorry. When we are not in the same room, this becomes very difficult to interrupt somebody. But here's my feeling about this. And if somebody wants to change this idea, please speak up. But Gina, when I listen to you, the way I want to round this discussion out is if you can come forward with yourself and I don't know, 5 other, whatever number you want to pick, people, you get those names to City Manager Harlow Shaw and to David Konopke, and then the city will bring a meeting together to include those people. So if we continue to talk about specifics at this point in our meeting, we're not going to get anywhere. What we need is those people from the disabled community. If you can get them, we will be in your debt. Get those names to the individuals I said, and I guarantee you a meeting, the city wants this meeting to include the disabled community. So if you get the names, we will move forward. I mean, if there's
3 people,
else
what's the minimum number that you need? Because I can get 3 of us right now. But
then,
I don't know what you need for a minimum to have for
okay,
this
there is
committee.
no minimum. If you get your group together, give those names to the city manager and the David Konopke. They'll put the meeting together, of which I would certainly love to be there, or anybody else. So let's do it that way. I'm sorry to say it like this. If everybody agrees that this discussion can, I hate to use the word end, I'm not good at bossing people around. If it can close with this proviso, Gina will get a bunch of people, the names go to the city will get that meeting at long last with everybody together, and we can move forward with our education program and the desires of our disabled community. How about that?
So, George, can I just ask a clarification?
Yes.
Really quickly? Is the purpose of this meeting in part to inform the PR strategy we have around the ADA with the greater community, with private businesses and so forth?
I'll answer it this way. When I had the Zoom meeting with City Manager Harlow Schalk and David Konopke, we by the way, we had that with Melinda Reed as well, the education program. And to me, part of this meeting is the education program, and also the city listening to the people, like Jim said, listening to people with disabilities. This is what we love about our community. Here's the problems we see. This is what we would like y'all to work on first. Without that, the city has no guidance. The city does only what they think it needs to do. And I don't mean that like that sounded. I mean, the city needs the input from the disabled community without a doubt. So that meeting would be twofold. The disabled community is explaining to the city what they see as great and what they see as problems we need to fix, and input on the overall education program, which would be disseminated through the city website, the ADA page on the city website, newspaper, TV, satellite phone, movies, TV, everything.
Ellie, this is Jim. I probably take a little different approach with George. I really see that this meeting would simply to be get input from the disabled community, what's working, what's not working, where their greatest issues are. I think we need to have that and then strategize and say, what do we want to go out with the business community and the rater? If there's other things we need to do with the education program, we need to be secondarily say, here's what we've heard from the disabled community, and here's what we think we should do to make it better for them. But I really think that's the first piece is really getting a good dialogue with representatives with all aspects of disabilities. That probably includes mental health,
Yes,
as well as the physically disabled and visually disabled and hearing impaired. So So not necessarily narrow focused on those with physical
That's correct.
mobility limitations.
That's correct.
So
Thank you, Jim.
this is Sharon. So to kind of move this discussion along, we had Jake, our PIO, come. I think he talked to us, but and David or Ellie, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but that was part of what he was going to do as part of that PR communication education piece. So I think this discussion is good because it provides for that first step. What I would encourage everybody is to go through this ADA committee and not go out separately from it, because then we can have one focal point for all this information. So I think we're all saying the same thing. I'm just talking a little bit about process. So, and I know Jake, I don't see Jake on here, but I know he was very interested in what the first steps would be. And I think this is a very good suggestion for first steps.
Thank you, Sharon. If there's no other discussion on the minutes, may I have a motion to accept the minutes?
I think Jim might have made the motion, but I'm happy to second that too.
Oh, wow. Okay, I didn't hear that. Thank you. Thank you, Commissioner Dean. All those in favor, just scream aye. Aye.
Aye.
Thank you all. Motion is passed. Thank you all very much. The next thing under F in our new business is update on sidewalk presentation to the City Commission, ADA Enforcement Transportation Services, the fabulous David Kanofsky.
Don't keep saying all those nice things. My head will get too big. So, you know, right now, as far as the sidewalk discussion that's coming up at the next commission meeting to discuss the proposed programs. And the three proposed programs right now is basically modernization of the volunteer sidewalk program, a slip, trip, and fall program, and also a safe routes to school program. So those will be presented to the commission, you know, for their comments and discussion on those. As far as the other, Ellie, could you go back to what was the other topics on the ADA enforcement? So that's in conjunction with the question that George had earlier. We're working with the city attorney's office and the police department and the city manager to try to sort out how to best go about the ADA enforcement for, you know, things like trash cans on the sidewalk or unauthorized vehicles parked in handicap spaces. There's about 3 or 4 other main topics that we've come across throughout the, you know, over time that people have brought to us. So we're looking at how we can best either adapt the city code or revise it to move forward to, you know, provide that service more effectively.
Well, I mean, I for one, and I do remember the presentation you did for that work session, David, and I did like the 3 proposals that made it to the top. I'm hoping it's going to be 1 and 2. So, but thank you for that, David. And it may be too late for you to bring this up, David, but in that meeting, I believe something y'all should discuss is escalating fees, escalating fines. This is not about the city's responsibility necessarily, but it was parking responsibility. There's a guy I know in my neighborhood, he's gotten 4 tickets for parking his big truck on the sidewalk. They're only 25. I mean, that's a lot of money, but they're $25. He continues to do it, but on the other side of the street. So when I said to Tim, does this guy not care? I mean, don't the parking fines increase? He said, no, we don't have that. The city's unwilling to do that. I believe the city needs to change their tune about escalating fines rather.
So if I
Because
could
the city
comment,
can't stop this guy.
yeah, if I could comment real quick on the
Okay.
escalating fines. I don't think the city is unwilling to do that. It's not in
I
city
understand.
code right now. And that is, I'll note it to be part of the discussion that we're
Yep.
having. One thing I did fail to mention is some of these obstacles that people have, like the vertical deflections of sidewalk panels. The city will be receiving a sidewalk concrete grinder to,
Yes.
sorry, they're doing some work over here, to help mitigate those by grinding them down to make them not an obstacle anymore. So
Excellent. Excellent.
this is going to be another one of those processes that once we come up with some solutions, that we'll have some public comment and engagement on those through whatever means or we figure out, but to make sure that we're still headed down the right track with everyone involved.
That's good news, David. Thank you very much. There is the next agenda, update on proposed community outreach and other educational activities. Is Jacob in?
I don't believe that Jake was available to join us today, George, unfortunately. But we can still go over the information that he provided us. And I essentially took all the information that he put together, and incredibly grateful for him to take the time to do that and to meet with me and Sharon to talk through first. And I took the information that he provided us and pasted it into this Word document. So hopefully it meets with your approval, and we'd love to hear if you have any suggestions, recommended changes.
Ellie Ray, where is that thing?
April, are you able to move down to the ADA education campaign document?
I mean, is it in our packet?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
It was a voluminous packet, George. I apologize. There was a lot of content.
No. What page is it, El Ray?
I
got it. I got it. Thank you.
Okay.
Far now.
Okay, it was page 13 of the PDF, but I don't know.
Yep.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Okay. So this is just a rough sketch, basically, of where we think we're headed. And Jake had provided me with links to, I can't remember how many communities there were, 5 or 6 communities, and to look at their own ADA websites. And it was quite the spread as far as content is concerned. So I have about 5 or 6 pages of handwritten notes on them that I intend to, when I can come up for air from 1 or 2 other things I'm working on, just sit down and review and try and figure out what kind of content makes sense to incorporate into our own website, pointing to a lot of federal information and otherwise.
That's a heck of a schedule. That's fantastic.
Yes, wow. And we're hopeful that we can stick to it more or less. Obviously, summer's already here, so
man,
yeah.
Well, I mean, I think this is fantastic. I want to thank him very much. New on the job and making great progress. And by the way, Eric Dowell, who I know is not here, the manager of Safeway, he asked if he could receive the emails when we have ADA compliance committee meetings. And I said, well, I think so, but I don't know. Is that possible?
Yes, we did have him on the email for this meeting. Actually, now he has transferred over to the Albertsons. That is by Target.
So he can be on the email list from now on? That was my question.
Yeah, that's not a problem.
Oh, great.
We can have April add him to the email. Yep, we can have April add him to the email list.
Great. Proposal for the expansion of the ADA Advisory Committee's role. I do want to say, and I know that I'm repeating myself, and I'm sorry, I may have got somewhat emotional at our last meeting. If I insulted anybody or y'all thought I was out of line, I sincerely apologize. I think what's happened for me as a member of this committee is my 50 years of advocacy has sort of come to a head. And I personally have for years tried to expand the scope of the ADA committee. And as y'all remember, last Zoom meeting, I said, if I have misjudged the desire of the committee, I stand corrected and I won't bring this up again. But to me, the narrow scope of this committee was certainly purposely done by the city when they made this committee. So we're quite impotent as a committee. And I believe that if we're here to protect the disabled community, we need more people with disabilities on the committee, and we need to be involved in things other than the complaint process. So this is the time, and I asked y'all last week, if y'all don't want to do that thing, then the discussion is unnecessary. I mean, on my part, I won't bring it up again if there's no interest, because in the past, there's been no interest.
So George, I sense that we're swiftly moving on from looking at the PR strategy now to talking about the last item on the agenda. Is that correct?
I thought that's where we were.
Okay. As far as talking about the board's role and responsibilities and such?
That's correct.
Okay.
I mean, that's the proposal for expansion.
Correct. Okay. I just wanted to double check if anybody had any questions or comments about the outreach.
Oh,
plan.
shoot. I'm a bad chair. I've told you, I'm a bad chair.
That's okay. And we'll circle back to the top item too. I think that
the only thing I would mention is I know Jake is also working on like a citywide communications plan. And so, which I'm very much looking forward to. And so one of the things that might be helpful too is just noting within that how this plan works into that broader communications plan. I know that he's, I think, going to be working on some of the other committees too, but just making sure that it is actually part of that comms plan, I think would be great.
Thank you, Commissioner Dean.
wholeandnourished.com. Fully prepared meals from local organic ingredients delivered to Bozeman, Livingston, Belgrade, and Fort Cummins.
So, Ellie Ray, I need you. Is it correct that I'm waiting for any kind of response to my statement about the expansion, but with respect to the latitude of this committee?
So I was just taking a moment to double back to the PR strategy quickly because we didn't, I think, finish that discussion before we could move on to the
discussion from David's report.
Oh no, from Jake's PR strategy, the outline, the education campaign. So I had just circled back to that.
Oh, you weren't done. I'm so sorry.
That's okay. That's okay. But I don't know if either Jim or Gina have anything else that they'd like to share on the subject. If not, then we can move on. But
so what do we have in the works for the campaign?
So we are still technically kind of in the month of June as far as making changes. We need to revisit the website more and tidy up some of the links and where the ADA information is located on the website for the city, and get started on trying to figure out some PSA information. But I think before we do any of that, based on discussions that have already taken place during the course of this meeting today, we need to convene a group of individuals, which Sheena, if you could provide some information for contacts, you can just send them to me via email. We can work to try and get some sort of a meeting set up to talk about as discussed, what members of the disabled community, enjoy about the city of Helena, what's working and what needs improvement or what is a problem, so that we can use that to help inform the overall PR process.
Okay.
So yes, that is currently where we are. It's doing some engagement and making website updates. We're not quite at the point where I think we can do any PSAs. And I think we should probably hold off on business outreach until we have some of those discussions. But this was at the very least just a rough sort of skeleton outline of how we can move forward with the PR strategy and hopefully keep on track to get a lot of this stuff accomplished before the year is out in the start of next year.
So the thing about Gina getting a group of disabled citizens together, could those same people meet with Jake about this?
I would expect that Jake would probably be a party to the meeting. And
Okay.
Just as Commissioner Dean was noting, if he's already working on a citywide communications plan, it would be good to make sure that whatever gets done with a PR campaign for this purpose dovetails with whatever policies, procedures, et cetera, are going to be employed with that comms plan.
So that communication plan would then go to, for instance, the Disability Rights Montana, nursing homes, schools, the mental health facilities, that kind of thing. Is that correct?
I don't see a reason why it couldn't be distributed. I don't know how the comms plan is being drafted and how they're soliciting input on the citywide policy.
Yeah.
But certainly, that's something that we can consider doing as it moves forward. But that in and of itself is a separate, almost a larger and parallel process that our PR campaign for ADA education outreach is related to, tangentially related to. So yeah,
I got you. Okay.
Two separate things.
I got you. Yeah. Okay. So
Ellie, this is Jim. Would it be possible to get a facilitator to go through this focus group with our committee, so this committee can actually hear what those people with disabilities biggest issues are? That would certainly help give us focus. And I don't really think I can address expanding the scope of this committee without input from the disability community. I think actually, as I read the scope, I think there's more scope in this committee than we're utilizing. So I'm not sure we need to expand the scope. Maybe we change the structure to make it us more effective is something we might want to think about.
Thank you, Jim. And I'm open to any of that way to find us to have a little bit more input with the disabled community. As I said, you're a clear thinker, Jim, and I appreciate that remark. And you're exactly right. Thank you. Is there further discussion about the education campaign by Jake?
I just want to ask a really quick question of Jim. Jim, were you suggesting that the initial meeting that we have with members of the disability community to talk about the things that we've already mentioned in this meeting, that would be something that you'd want a facilitator present for that? Or for?
Yes, that's what I was thinking, that
okay.
when we get this group of 5 to 20, whatever number of individuals together, that a facilitator would help us focus on those objectives and draw out effectively the input that we're seeking from those disabled. So it doesn't become an individual complaining about a specific instance, that we're more broadly thinking about what does accessibility mean in this community, given our topographic, our climate, and all of these issues that we have, and how does a person with disabilities, what are the obstacles those create that we can take care of, and what are those things that they just have to live with? I don't know.
Sure. No, that makes sense. Is there a recommendation from all of you as members of the committee on that?
I go along with that. Thank you.
Okay.
One thing I would just want to note is it might be worth finding out if there is someone on staff that might be able to help with facilitation, because I would hate to delay this because of budgeting or lack of budgeting for facilitators. So that's just one thing to keep in mind so we don't slow things down, is who that facilitator might be and the funds to pay for it.
And George, this is Sharon. I think we'll talk to Jake. We'll see if he's comfortable facilitating the meeting or
Okay.
somebody else, because that might be something he's familiar with. So
That's fantastic. Okay.
yeah.
Sharon, that's a great suggestion.
Excellent. Further discussion on the education? I mean, sorry, the communication campaign.
I have none.
Excellent. Shall we move on to public comment?
George, really quickly, two things actually. The first of which is we never actually, I think we kind of might have glossed over the first item under new business. I don't know if anybody had any questions regarding
The transition plan.
Yes, I just wanted to double check. I had compiled a list of items from the transition plan that was done by RAC with some new information that we had from when the Law and Justice Center, the 404, 406 building was being reviewed by
Ellie, I have a number of comments on the transition plan.
Okay.
You keep bouncing it up there and then it disappears, but as we bounce around. The first thing is the Bill Roberts Golf Course, and I recognize some of these facilities have been built and constructed and renovated in the recent past, I'll say. It says that it was in compliance with the adopted building codes. And the ADA codes and the uniform or the architectural design guidelines for ADA are much more specific than the building codes. And so as I look at some of these buildings, like the Exploration Works as an example, that I would expect that given their date of construction, there would be no issues because they should have been built in compliance with ADA. And so is the city requiring architects to design and contractors to build buildings in compliance with the architectural design guidelines?
I honestly don't, Jim.
Jim, I can answer that. Yes. If it's a city-owned building, yes, we are.
Okay.
That's part of our building division's review.
So like, for example, the Bill Roberts Golf Course, we should not have any deficiencies.
That would be the assumption. I don't,
I know
yeah.
Yeah. And so, like the Hats facility has a number of issues, and it's been a while since that's been built. And the Exploration Works, I was surprised to see the number of deficiencies for some of the newer buildings. And some of the buildings, some of the deficiencies, I'm not too worried about. Some of the public works buildings, my main concern is that a person in the public who wants to have a meeting there or an employee has accessible facilities. But some of those are not frequented by people with it in the disability community very much, or even by the public in general very much. And so as we do our priorities, those buildings, and this is something I would really like to get input from the disability community, is what of these facilities do they frequent and where do they have the most issues?
Thank you for that, Jim.
Hey, I got a question for Jim. Jim, remember when you and I were talking about the transition plan, you made the remark that it would be great to know not just the plan, but what actually has been done. Remember that conversation?
Yes, I do.
And so this transition plan, this is not, I mean, this is a question. I'm reading this as not what's done. This is the transition plan. Oh, I'm getting confused now. This is the plan. This isn't what's been done.
This is a list of facilities and identifies the deficiencies with them.
Correct.
And they identify that they need to be addressed either in phase 1, 2, or 3.
Yeah.
I'm real clear. I think I knew at one time what phase 1 and 2 and 3, phase 1 being more immediate, but even within like the Chamber of Commerce building, I see parking, for example, as a more imminent need and access into the buildings. My priority is that a person should be able to arrive at any public facility, access the public facility, and then probably my third priority is the bathrooms are accessible. We can make accommodations on some of these other things more easily than the architectural changes. So those are the kinds of things I'd like to get input from the disability community.
Yes.
And I see our role as a committee is having a conversation with the city when they are doing, say they're going to renovate the Chamber of Commerce. You know, I don't know what's wrong with the stairs, how much out of compliance. Is it just a handrail? Is it really something we need to worry about? Obviously, if you're doing a renovation, you'd want to take care of those things.
Yes. But
to go in and specifically make a change, I don't know if that's a big priority on some of these. I was very surprised that for example, the Exploration Works, the elevator apparently isn't in compliance. Here it just says elevators. That would be a new elevator. I don't know what is out of compliance there. Certainly some of these things, the stairs should have been in compliance. The signage, you know, a lot of these things should have been in compliance, I would think. So what I would like to see this committee more involved in is when Parks and Rec or this transportation are looking at doing, say, handicapped ramps, curb cuts, whatever, run it by the committee and have some direction from the committee of saying, here's our recommendation that, you know, there may be things that you're intending to do that are lower priority, and there may be things that are higher priority, but we don't give you much input and we don't have a lot of direction on just what you're doing or the direction you're going. Does that make sense?
So, George, if I might.
No, go ahead, Sharon, please.
And first of all, I think we will be updating this list to identify what, if any of these things have already been done. Because that's going to be part of our report to the commission, and we'll share that with you. But having said that, that establishes the baseline of what needs to be left. And then maybe that is one of the things I hear what you're saying, Jim, that perhaps this group can do is assist in identifying or have the departments present which things are going to address and any priorities on that, or to have some input. That's what I'm hearing you say, have some input in terms of what things are more important, or to understand from their budgeting and from their facilities management why they may choose to do I through L. I don't know, I1, or these are Roman numerals, I guess, 1 through 5 versus 6, 7, and 8. You know, I don't know if that makes sense. Is that kind of what you're saying, Jim, in some level?
Yes, it is. It's having some input, not simply as a committee that you report of what you've done, but a committee that's assisting you in setting those priorities or giving you input prior to you actually doing the work. As I look at this report, it seems like Parks and Rec has really done the lion's share of addressed the lion's share of the deficiencies. I'm sorry that Christy's not here. You'll have to pass on to her. It looks like they're doing a great job. One of my comments is on the Beatty Street trailhead, and I get it. It's a new trailhead. Your new construction needs to be in compliance. We have an ADA restroom. We have an ADA picnic table. But unless somebody with a physical disability wants to go and have a picnic there, they really don't have access to the trails because the trails really are not very, very friendly to them. So I get it that we have accessible elements in really non-accessible, and that's probably not a priority site. I get it that we did it. It didn't cost that much more money to do it right, so that's good. But so anyway, yeah, that's what I would like to do. I think going through this list, it seems like you've done a really great job on your parks side.
I'd like to make a comment, but in general, but Jim, a little bit take an issue with your statement about the Beatty Street. It is accessible to anybody, but I mean, depends on the disability. So I believe your statement is not necessarily true. I mean, when you said we've got all that, but the trail is not accessible, well, that's not true. It just depends on the disability.
Well, yes. So a person in a wheelchair that needs to use the restroom or the picnic table that is wheelchair friendly.
Yeah.
A person with a physical disability, yes. A person on crutches, a person in a lot of disabilities can certainly use the trail system.
Yeah.
And when you're doing it, I get it. You do it right, so there's no problem there. But
it is. I remember when we did the transition plan, and it's nice to have this update. It is my understanding that by law, we need to have an update on the prioritization plan, which you kind of referred to that, Jim, that, why is the city doing 1 through 5 instead of 6 and 7? The prioritization plan dictated that, but we haven't seen any update on the prioritization plan, which I believe is required by law. So it would be great to have that along with this document as well. So Sharon, why don't we have that document?
So the prioritization plan in the transition plan was the phase 1, phase 2, and phase 3. So that was the city's prioritization plan. So what this document's intended is to identify those things that have been completed. And I don't have the information in front of whether phase 1 or phase 2 or phase 3. But what I hear Jim asking for, what the staff is going to present to the commission, is to look at, and I haven't looked at the transition plan to remind myself what phase 1 is, but the intent of that transition plan was phase 1 was the #1 priorities. Phase 2 was secondary priorities, and phase 3 was the third priorities. So the intent of this update was our first crack at looking at that transition plan, identifying what's been done under phase 1, or if there's any other things. And then what I hear Jim saying is, so as we move forward, having this group look at what's left in that transition plan and assisting staff in prioritizing that as we move, hopefully from the completion of phase 1 into phase 2 and phase 3. And also identifying those things that weren't part of the transition plan. Beatty Park wasn't part of the transition plan. I don't believe that Bill Roberts' Golf Clubhouse was part of the transition plan because they weren't under construction. So that's the intent of this first gathering of information. And I think it was a good start. I think we just have a little more to go with regard to what we're doing. Ellie, do you have any comments?
I do. I think that one of the next steps we have, and I dropped a link into the chat box, and George, I appreciate you might not be able to access it very easily on your iPad, but it's just a link off of the city website to the 67-page listing of projects from the transition plan. And just as a reminder for everybody, this was adopted in 2017. And what I have understood from reading the plan and then from hearing more from staff that were actually working with RAC at the time, since I was not in this position at that time and working directly with them myself, is that the phases were to run over an 11-year period. So the phase one was recommended to be a 3-year process, and it was to address sort of the low-hanging fruit, and I think some of the areas, you know, where you're likely to see most public interactions with facilities. And then phase two was intended to be a 4-year period, and the phase three was also intended to be a 4-year period. So it's 11 years, and from 2017, with that being adopted then, with the plan being adopted then, that would run until 2028. So we still have yet time to go to address these. And this was a really good start in engaging with, you know, the facilities manager for the city and with Christy in particular, since these largely fall under their purview, to, you know, remind them, because Christy, for instance, was not with the city at the time the transition plan was adopted, but to remind them about some of the items that were flagged. But I think one of the next steps is to actually go through that 67 pages of different activities and check off under each item whether it had been addressed or not. Some of them cost very little money or no cost at all, and some of the, so they should have been addressed under phase one. Some of them were much more expensive. There were millions of dollars worth of activities as part of this overall transition plan. So Sharon's right, we do need to, this was just a first pass to kind of highlight at a very high level some of the activities and areas where there were deficiencies found at city facilities. But there is a lot more work to be done, and definitely I think in having reviewed it, in hearing from Troy as a facilities manager in particular, you know, it reminded him of some of the priorities that he maybe needs to put into his budget as an example. So I think it's a good pass, a good reminder, and hopefully we can get some more information to take forward.
Ellery, may I ask you a question?
Of course, and I see Gina also has her hand raised, so in case you can't see that, George.
When it says plan addressed, does addressed mean identified or fixed?
In the notes from the, where, do you have an example?
You know, so under transition plan number 2, Chamber of Commerce building, RAC, plan addressed the following areas. Does address mean fixed or identified?
Identified.
So my question remains, can we have, aren't we required by law to have a document that shows what has been done within the prioritization plan?
So as Sharon was saying, yeah, well, that's a step that we need to undertake, is to go through and point by point with there were, I think the information I have is that in total there were, let me see. Pardon me, I was just reading something from the transition plan, a summary of findings. 1 second, there were 5,300 access deficits cited at 75 site reports as part of the drafting of the transition plan. So for all those 5,300 items, George, we need to go through and basically provide an update point by point through the listing. So that the plan established this list of activities that need to take place and assigned a priority level to them. But now, years out from its adoption, we need to go through that list and actually say where things stand with each individual item.
I'm sorry, was that a question to me? You know,
no, that was a statement.
iPad, I'm not getting good. I can't hear you that well with my iPad speaker.
No, that's okay.
I'm going to ask, I'll ask it in a different way. Can we be supplied with the as we're required by law, to have the list of things that have been fixed already?
So what I was saying, George, is that we need to go, we being city staff, need to go through the list, which is 67 pages long.
Holy mackerel. Okay.
Yeah, and that's the link that I just provided to everybody in the chat box a short while ago. And that outlines for every issue with parking, for example, the Chamber of Commerce building, what needs to be rectified and a cost associated with that activity. And again, those, I should also note those costs were from 2017. And in the pandemic riddled world that we live in, those costs have actually gone up tremendously in a number of instances. So we need to account for that inflation and try to work to put items, we need to mark off which ones have been addressed and try and figure out how to budget for the ones that remain.
Well, I remember, I mean, I was involved in all that, and I remember the presentation from the city was to come into compliance was 11.4 million. I can't imagine what it is now.
Yeah, it's much higher. And I would also note that this list is, this summary is not consistent and formed throughout because the park stuff is slightly different to capture information on than some of these other facilities. And another thing to mention, and it's kind of borne out in this document, and we talked about it previously, is, you know, we had the staff from what used to be RAC come back to Helena to look at our parking garages and the Law and Justice Center and the municipal court. So those are three things that were not captured in the previous RAC transition plan. So that is in addition to the 67 pages of items that is listed on the website. So we had, as staff, have to go through each item point by point and basically say if it's been completed or not, and then figure out how to, from there, especially for any items that might be phase one items that are outstanding still, how to prioritize those within the budget.
I understand, but one last question. Am I saying something that's incorrect, that as a city, we need to make public the things that have been done from the prioritization plan? We need to make that public. Is that correct or incorrect?
My understanding is that's correct, and we should be doing that anyway. And that's something that will ultimately be done once we get an updated list.
And again, I'm not trying to be rude. I mean, but I've been told by people who do this kind of work that legally we're behind in letting the public know the work that's been done. We, the city, because the DOJ says this needs to be made public. But am I being told that incorrectly?
That's not something I'm personally prepared to speak to, George.
I'm sorry, what?
I'm not prepared to speak to that personally.
I think that's something that we can get advice from our city attorney. I do not know that to be a fact, George.
Okay,
what
thank
the legality is or not.
Yeah.
So let's check Thomas.
Yeah, I'm not
Thank you.
entirely certain, George, that the phases that were assigned, that those terms that I mentioned for 3 years, 4 years, and 4 years were fast and hard deadlines.
So George, I do not think the disclosure of what's been done and not done is a requirement under ADA. It may be a policy of the city. They may choose to do it, but I don't think there's any legal obligation. ADA talks about the things you should be doing to make things accessible, but I'm not aware of anything that you need to do to tell people what you've done.
I understand. As long as y'all understand, I couldn't get the answer. And when 3 people chimed in, I understand the answer now, but I was being persistent because I didn't have the answer and I couldn't figure it out. So again, maybe I'm misunderstood. I apologize if I've spoken out of turn, but I just couldn't understand the answer. Thank you.
George, again, you might not be able to see this on your iPad right now, but Gina has her hand raised. So Gina, do you have a question or comment that you'd like to provide?
I'm going to throw my iPad away. I can't understand what you said. I'm as close as I can get. Say it again.
It's okay. Gina has had her hand raised to make a comment or ask a question. So I'm just going to let her do so now.
Absolutely.
Okay.
I got you. Yep.
Okay. I wanted to say that I really appreciate the prioritization of what locations to do first and what areas to do that. I think that's a good place to start. And I would also, in regards to the Beatty Street trail access, one of the hot topics is e-assist bikes. And that's one way that the disabled community would be able to access those trails and throughout the city of Helena and the surrounding mountain bike trails. So I think that we should be aware that there is this e-bike discussion and that there's a movement against it, a movement for it. And as the ADA committee, I would like us to weigh in on the topic of e-assist on city trails.
One thing that I just want to note too, when we had the discussion, I don't know, a month or two ago, about this, the city manager, she mentioned this in her remarks, that the rules that we do have provide that individuals with mobility disabilities are allowed to use the city trails that are open to the public with the assistance of motor-driven mobility devices, if they can provide credible assurance that the device is being used for a mobility disability. So I just want to make sure, I know that was something that was said a few times during the meeting, and I just want to make sure that everyone's clear that that is currently what the rules are as well.
Thank you for the update. I was unable to attend that meeting and I hadn't heard an outcome. So I'm happy to hear that. Very pleased. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
And I know, I'm sure that, well, Christy's not on here anymore, but I think they do have like a statement that goes with that. The city, the only reason I know that word for word is because I had the city manager send it to me. So I'm sure she can provide it to you all as well if you need it.
I would like to request that at this time, that I have access to that and that I can share that with my disabled community and people that want to frequent our trails. So thank you. Well done.
Thank you, Commissioner Dean. I do want to say that at the next meeting, my battery is about dead. So at my next meeting, I mean, I won't be here. I'm going to be back east working. But I do want to say, please, battery, don't die. Do I still have y'all?
We're still here, George, and the next meeting is not until September. Just FYI, I don't know.
I wanted to make a statement.
Sure.
So I just want to make a statement to Gina. Gina, the next meeting is scheduled for September. If that does in fact happen, I would hope that before that meeting, you would be able to gather I'm going to call it the contingency, the 50 people, the 100 from the disabled community, and put them in connection with the city. Is that something that you think you can do, let's say soon?
I'm hoping. One of the
excellent.
The only concern I have is technology, because some of the individuals that I know have cognitive
issues,
and so using Zoom and stuff like that. So I'm hoping to work with Ellie Ray. Will you be my contact person to try and work out the details of the special needs or request of who I can find?
Sure.
Okay, thanks.
Great. So once again, Jim, you're going to be taking over the next meeting. And I want to thank all of y'all for having the meeting today. I think we got a lot accomplished. And just thank y'all for being willing to stay with this whole process. And let's see if we can all work together and make some changes. Does anybody else have any comments? If not, if you do, we're ready. If you don't, I'll call for a motion to adjourn. If there are no other comments, I think I'm losing y'all. Can we have an adjournment? Do we need a vote?
Do I
move
need
that
to
we
second
adjourn.
the motion?
You can adjourn the meeting.
Okay. If everybody is okay, I'm going to adjourn the meeting. If not, speak up. Excellent, y'all. Thank you very, very much.
Thanks,
Thank you.
George.
Thank you.
Okay,
Bye,
we're
everyone.
adjourned, y'all. Okie dokie.